Honorable Speaker, President Ramaphosa, honorable members, patriots and citizens of our great nation. I rise on behalf of the MK Party to give a perspective and dissect the underlying mechanics of budget vote number 1, the presidency. Honorable Speaker, what we are debating here today is not just a budget. It is the financial architecture of a parallel state, a budget that funds insulation, protects inefficiency, and advances elite consolidation under the guise of reform. Let us be clear. This presidency budget is not only economically indefensible, but is legally and institutionally corrosive. Under the veil of reform, we are watching the calculated erosion of constitutional accountability and the quiet transfer of state levers to unaccountable corporate fora and consultant ecosystems. Khalil Gibran, writing on deception in The Prophet, says, and I quote, "The reality of the other person lies not in what he reveals to you, but what he cannot reveal to you. Therefore, if you would understand him, listen not to what he says, but rather on what he does not say." Close quotes. Honorable members, allow me to start where the deception is most technical and most dangerous, Operation Vulindlela. Launched with fanfare, presented on a cross-cutting reform initiative, and now in the second phase, Operation Vulindlela has become the Trojan horse of neoliberal structural privatization. By way of a short case study, under Operation Vulindlela, a policy decision has been taken to depoliticize the supply of public services such as water supply by transferring operations to the private sector while retaining infrastructure ownership in government, under the guise that the state has insufficient funds to fund traditional public goods. Basic infrastructure has deliberately been ignored and not funded over the past 7 years in sectors such as water, electricity, logistics. This then qualifies them as the low-hanging fruits of Operation Vulindlela. The Constitution of South Africa guarantees the right to access to adequate water. However, the privatization of water services motivated by maximization of profit frequently undermines this right. South Africa faces significant backlogs in water infrastructure development.
Gama,
and yes.
Please just pause for a moment and take your seat. I have a hand on the virtual platform. Honorable Letsi, why do you want to be recognized?
Thank you very much. I wanted to check if Honorable Gama's bail condition allows him to debate in the House.
No, Honorable Letsi, that's not a point of order. Honorable Gama, please continue.
South Africa faces significant backlogs in water infrastructure development and maintenance. Most of our municipalities are cash-strapped. Water concessions such as the Slulumanzi in Nelspruit and the Dolphin Ilembe district concessions have been used as pilot projects for the commodification of water. While these pilot projects offer more efficient billing and collection systems and reduce water leakages, private concessions tend to be more costly as they emphasize full cost recovery and foreclose lower income households. However, like everything else, this policy ignores the character of the economy of South Africa, where the majority of the Black population are unemployed and remain outside the catchment of the productive economy. It lacks of social equity, ignores affordability, and is devoid of human rights concerns, which militate against privatization of water, which results in elevated tariffs and installation of prepaid meters. Low-income citizens struggle with high basic household costs, leading to disconnections which negatively impact their socio-economic rights and health. The legacy of apartheid water access looms large, and the privatization of water exacerbates racial and class inequalities. Yet through Operation Vulindlela, significant policy decisions have been taken to privatize and thus commodify the public good called water. No consultation with communities took place, and neither is there effective governance, transparency of contracts, or proper regulation put into place before jeopardizing the crucial constitutional right to water. Those in parliament will often attest never being consulted on the privatization of water distribution to communities. Now, I just want to turn and assist a few people here who have a lull. In 2015, which was which was the last year that the indefatigable Lucky Montana ran PRASA, there were 542 million passenger trips on our railways. By 2019, this had reduced to 200 million after the butcher of SOEs, Popomlife, had taken over. Nowadays, in 2025, PRASA is battling to reach 70 million trips, which is 12% of the capacity it had in 2015. Yet some of you will come to this house and blame Montana. He left PRASA 10 years ago, and no one since that day has reached the staggering records he and his team were able to achieve. Between 2016 and 2018, Brian Molefe managed to stop load shedding, President. And for more than 540 days, South Africa forgot what load shedding is. It was to return in May 2018 when new president started preaching a new dawn, which has proved to be a long night. We experienced up to level 6 load shedding until 2024, when the Enro left, the CEO who had been hired by this administration. He was actually writing a book instead of running ESCOM. In 2018, when Transnet was glorious and on the ascent, it carried 226 million tons on its railways and made a profit of 5 billion rand. Today, after this administration had to create a business case for what it would term state capture, again bringing the butcher of SOEs, who ejected all the skilled personnel, Transnet was brought to its knees and could only carry 151 million tons last year and a staggering loss of 7 billion rand. This is 35% less than it carried during the glorious years of 2017-2018. 2 days ago, Transnet was downgraded by Standards & Poor's. And they cited that it is unlikely to meet the target tonnage that it had set for itself. On the 22nd of February 2018, SARS reached the 1 trillion mark for the third consecutive year under Commissioner Moyane, and yet a judge was hired to rubbish all the achievements he had made. That is the nature of New Dawn South Africa. Successful Black executives who have backbones and refuse to be assimilated are identified, tainted, harassed, and humiliated so that no Black child can have a positive role model. Today, lies are being told, but the numbers do not lie. SOEs were deliberately brought to their knees so that a new trick called Operation Vulindlela could be hatched. You are opening the privatization path for the rich elites to consolidate their wealth to the continued exclusion of the masses of our people. According to its own documents, the presidency and treasury have used Operation Vulindlela to fast-track the corporatization of the National Ports Authority, vertically separate Transnet Freight Rail, formalize the National Transmission Company of South Africa, restructure the ESCOM grid, and create PSP units housed in the DBSA and water boards, all outside the scrutiny of Parliament. In other words, it is a project that outsources state power, re-engineers public ownership, and neutralizes public accountability through reform milestones and asserts privatization as the panacea for all of the country's economic ills. As an example, and this is by no means exhaustive, the vertical separation of Transnet Freight Rail is ill-advised. Breaking up of a network industry whose costs remain low as a result of economies of scale, where fixed costs can be spread proportionally based on more volumes carried by rail, will result in higher costs to consumers. However, the presidency is hell-bent on selling the country's crown jewels and will even do so without a proper business case which would have informed it that the lack of densification of commodities in the rail space militates against breaking freight rail at this point. Private companies will have to charge more as the rail infrastructure provider's source of income will shift to access fees. By 2029, this government will have to subsidize the Transnet Freight Rail Infrastructure Manager upwards of 30 billion rand per annum. And like British Rail, we will recognize the folly of this premature move later. This has not been provided for in the budget simply because the consultants are less than frank when providing advice to government. Whether it is at water boards or at Eskom or Transnet, there is no substitute for placing competent boards of directors and competent managers to lead the business and then drive the correct KPIs to meet societal expectations. Eskom has proved that with a competent chairperson and board, as well as recruiting knowledgeable CEO skills in the form of Dan Marokane, the entity can be turned around swiftly. This country does not need Operation Vulindlela. Izimboni zombuso sezithengiselwa labo abangenankosi, labo abangenaso isilo. The Operation Vulindlela process was not publicly debated in this house. It was introduced in the back door and repeated many times that people who do not know what it is will easily say, we remember the word, but they do not know what the program is. It was not subjected to socio-economic impact assessments. No business cases exist that have been publicly scrutinized, except data from sweetheart consultants who were hired to drive transfer of state assets into private hands. This is a neo-colonial and neoliberal agenda with a high price to pay for the country in the future. And we do not say that there are no industries that would benefit from privatization, but wholesale privatization as driven by Operation Vulindlela undermines the state's ability to drive economic growth through state-led investment and creating a responsible developmental state. The Vulindlela process is privatization by stealth, hidden in plain sight. It is administered through the National Treasury and Presidency-sponsored TBSA PSP unit and informed by consultants paid through undisclosed contractual mechanisms. This, honorable members, is real state capture. I repeat, a state of capture which uses legislative reform and policy abstraction. It is harder to see, but far more difficult to reverse. Imagine if we had sold SAA for 51 Rand as approved by the cabinet, and then 2 years later, it makes 250 million Rand profit. If it was this parliament that probed the Takatso deal and stopped it, and that saved the day. What we are witnessing is what legal professionals have correctly termed a soft coup, the systematic privatization of the state without the political cost of saying so. A submission by concerned legal professions to the Portfolio Committee on Transport makes sobering reading. It alleges coercive NDAs being used to silence whistleblowers within Transnet, the circumvention of procurement protocols, and a quiet corporatization of logistics through shadow structures like the National Logistics Crisis Committee, a body that does not appear in any law but acts with the authority of cabinet. The NLCC has an incestuous relationship with both BUSA, which front-loads business for South Africa, an entity with no legal persona as well, or standing under any laws of our country, as well as with the interim rail regulator. And all this is funded and sustained by Budget Vote 1. Honorable Speaker, Vote 1 is where the parallel state predominates. The presidency budget for 25-26 total 747 million. Of that, over 654 million is allocated to administration, mostly more than 561 staff, strategic communications, consultants, and outsourced services. More than 83 million is allocated to travel and subsistence. The support services to the President's sub-program, valued at 103 million, is described as including national commemorative advance, public engagements, and coordination of district oversight. But nowhere does it tell how this coordination is measured, reported, or verified. What we know, though, is this. While Vote 1 inflates, our municipalities collapse. While consultants grow, public engineers vanish. While NDAs spread, whistleblowers disappear. While PSP units expand, SOE balance sheets shrink. And while the presidency builds an empire of technocratic opaqueness, the people get more speeches and fewer services. This budget also pretends to fund reform, but it actually funds the insulation of the executive from the people it should serve. It funds the administration of market restructuring without the counterbalance of public interest and oversight. And it funds the creation of a parallel decision-making bodies, entities that are neither elected nor accountable, but are empowered to negotiate, contract, and plan in the name of the state. There's no line item for the NLCC or B4SA. There's no code for the TBSA PSP units operating under Vulindlela. There's no sub-program tracking the displacement of civil service roles by consultant frameworks. And yet these activities are now in the heartbeat of executive economic planning. The figures in this budget may balance on paper, but they unbalance the future.
Honorable Gamas, just hold on for a moment. Please take your seat. Honorable Deputy Minister, why do you want to be recognized?
I would like to check if the honorable member can take a question.
Thank you. Honorable Gama, are you prepared to take a question?
It depends who's asking. So South Africa is being
Okay, let's answer
structured
that one.
sector by sector, policy by policy, and budget by budget into a state that is administered by private design. That design is being implemented under the name of Operation Vulindlela, enforced through Budget Vote 1 and shielded by a wall of plausible deniability funded through careful communications, legal teams, and strategic advisors. Let us call this what it is: executive defiance of constitutional accountability. We in the MK party cannot and will not legitimize that through our silence or our vote. The MK party rejects
Thank you.
this vote. Vuka Taki.